Hi, welcome to the McTaggart Attack podcast. I'm Kevin McTaggart, and if you're listening to this podcast for the first time, my podcast is basically me trying to help myself. Because when I have to answer the question, who am I trying to help with my podcast? The answer that comes to my head before anyone else is me. So I vent about stuff on here, talk about stuff I like on here. Mostly I'm angry about stuff. And a lot of times, a few times now, I've been told that I say things that other people wish that they could, or that they're afraid to say, or something like that. Something in that regard. They know who they are. But if you find this podcast either funny or inspirational, or if you feel some way about this podcast, feel free to subscribe, rate, and review, or not. I don't care, because like I said, I do this podcast for me. So, what do I want to talk about in this podcast? What's on my mind today? What's pissing me off today? Or not? Or just what's on my mind? It's Monday morning, and this podcast is coming out. And so, it was the weekend. It was an okay weekend. It was alright. Frustrated about some stuff. Learning from it. Forgot to meditate Saturday, so my streak on 10% happier is ruined, and I have to start another streak. I have to start meditating all over again. But it's okay if you miss a day when you meditate. Just begin again. That's what they always fucking say. Begin again. Motherfuckers. But, I watched something this weekend, and I think I've talked about it before, but I didn't give it a title of the, I didn't give my full, complete thoughts on it, because it wasn't over yet. So, I watched The Last Ride documentary series on the WWE Network. It was a 5-part documentary, all about an hour's worth of episodes, some over an hour, some less than an hour. But it was Mark Calloway, The Undertaker, WWE legend, definitely one of their greatest wrestlers of all time. The documentary, filming of the documentary, started back in 2017 when he was thinking he was going to have his last match. He was preparing for what he thought was his last match at WrestleMania against Roman Reigns. And that was his last match. He thought it was going to be his last match. He left his ring gear in the middle of the ring, which is symbolic of what you do at the end of your last match. And then it talks about after that match and how he was not happy with how the match went. He was in terrible shape, and he didn't like ending it that way. So, the documentary goes on. The documentary, I think, was only supposed to go for that, while he was preparing, or that weekend of WrestleMania in 2017. But it went on for 3 years. And it talks about, the match that he had at WrestleMania the next year and how he trained for that, how he got a new hip, so he has 2 artificial hips now. So he, had his match with Cena at 2018. It talks about that. It talks about a few of the other matches that he's had with the WWE, because he wrestles he had been wrestling once every couple months, and He was still trying to look for, like, the best way to end it. I think the documentary is just basically him, Mark Calloway, trying to find a way to end his career on a good note. That's all he wanted to do. He wanted to leave on a good note. And the WrestleMania in 2017, I think that was 33, was not a good note. It's not how he wanted to leave things. So that's what happened there. So he that's what it is, and that's basically what the entire documentary is. Because, like, he, throughout his career, he kept in character in the ring and out of the ring for most of the time, and he hardly ever gave interviews at all until this documentary series. So he reveals a lot about himself. He talks a lot about, he talks a lot. He talks a lot. Mark Calloway talks a lot. And he says a lot. He talks about his career mostly. And how he kept getting that itch to come back. Because he never felt like it was time. He never felt like that was it. And I think it goes until he announces his retirement in the last episode, basically, is what happened. Because he finally achieved what he wanted as a going away. And the Boneyard match at this year's WrestleMania was his last match. At least that's what he thinks at the time. But no, he seems pretty official about it because he thanks a lot of people, and I think he's finally ready to move on with the rest of his life. And it was great. It was sad as a fan. I'm sad watching that. Like, what pisses me off, though, is I only watched it because there were spoilers about it already. Like, oh, The Undertaker announced his retirement in the last episode of The Last Ride. I'm like, thank you, jerks. So I fucking watched it. And it was still emotional for me. He's my favorite wrestler of all time. And I'm glad that it's over, but I'm sad that it's over. It's not just a chapter. It's a huge chapter for him, but it's like, it's a chapter for anyone who's a fan of his. That's it. It's over. It's done. I have to think it really is this time, because there's nothing he could really do to top any of that. And he really, I don't know. I think I'm rooting for him to not come back, but I'll be fine if he comes back, as long as it's like for the right reasons. And whether it's still in on-screen role, but not a wrestler. Something like that, But it was a great documentary series to watch. I really liked The Last Ride. I thought it gave so much behind the scenes stuff. So much behind the scenes with him, his wife, Michelle McCool, and the daughter that they have. And it's just great. And it talks about some personal losses in their lives, and I was just very, I loved it. I thought it was great. I jokingly said that I thought it was better than the Last Dance documentary series about Michael Jordan. But you can't compare the two. Yes, both of them are the greatest of all times in their respected sports. And yes, I said sports. But it was great watching all 5 episodes of The Last Ride as a huge wrestling fan. It was great to see that look, that behind the scenes look of him. I love some outtakes that they did when he and Kane were facing Triple H and Shawn Michaels, and they were prepping for that, and Undertaker's like, I've got 3 words for you. Go fuck yourself. That was hilarious. That was hilarious. And, but yeah, it was good. It was a good time. It was great. The whole thing was enjoyable to watch. Like I said, it gave a lot of behind the scenes footage of him and others and stuff, and his relationship with Vince McMahon. And I'll never get that image of Vince McMahon dry humping the Undertaker or hugging him from behind or something. It looked creepy. It was creepy. But yeah, I hope it's the last one. I'm assuming this was his last match. And I hope that it is. Because he seems to have a lot of injuries. And this documentary was great. And I feel like it was a great love letter to fans. It gave fans that look that they always wanted. And that's how you should retire, is exposing yourself that in that way. Doing, a love letter to the fans, giving them a look at you giving us a behind the scenes look is a great way to end a career, I think. Because I remember Letterman, when he ended the Late Show, he did the same thing. His episode showed a lot of behind the scenes stuff, how they did the show and stuff like that. And that was great. And what The Undertaker did with the Last Ride documentary series was fantastic. And I highly recommend it. Even if you're not a wrestling fan, I think you will definitely appreciate aspects of this documentary series. Because it was great. And I think that's all I have to say about it. And no, this does not count as Wrestling Wednesday. Wrestling Wednesday is still happening on Wednesday, but I'm just reacting to something that I saw this weekend, and I'm talking about it on my podcast because I can. Why? Because it's my podcast. And that's the bottom line if you smell what the McTaggart Attack podcast is cooking.